The morning sun cut through the bulletproof windows of Pentagon Conference Room E7, casting long shadows across polished mahogany. 12 of America's highest-ranking military officers sat in leather chairs worth more than most soldiers made in a year. Maps of Afghanistan covered the walls. Classified folders stamped with red letters lined the table. Admiral Jack Brennan stood at the head of the room, his seal trident pin catching the light. At 58, his gray eyes had witnessed 3 decades of warfare. His voice carried the weight of command. Gentlemen, we are discussing Operation Desert Shield 2, Alpha Level Classification. What I'm about to share could determine the fate of American lives overseas. The door opened. A woman in a simple gray service uniform entered, pushing a silver tea cart, auburn hair pulled back in a neat bun, green eyes downcast, hands steady on the cart's handle despite the sudden attention of 12 powerful men. Brennan's hands slammed on the table. "Get her out of this room, immediately." The sound echoed like a gunshot. Every officer turned toward the woman who had just entered. She stood 5'6", unremarkable at first glance. The kind of support staff that moved through the Pentagon like ghosts, invisible until someone needed something. "Does she even have proper clearance to be in here?" Brennan demanded. His voice rose with each word. "We're discussing classified intelligence about operations in active war zones." Colonel Vincent Garrison leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. 45 years old, Army Rangers background, chest covered in deployment ribbons. His face showed pure irritation. "How did civilian staff get access during a security briefing? This is completely unacceptable." The woman, her name tag read Kay Ashford, moved to the conference table without a word. She began setting teacups with practiced precision. Her movements were methodical, careful, each cup placed exactly the same distance from the edge. "I apologize for the intrusion, sir." Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "I'll be quick." Major Marcus Blackwell adjusted his Army intelligence uniform and scoffed. "Young lady, do you have any idea what kind of strategic discussions take place in this room?" He paused, looking her up and down with obvious dismissal. "These aren't matters for support staff." Captain Miles Thornton, his Marine dress blues adorned with combat ribbons, chuckled and nudged the officer beside him. "I bet she's never even held a real weapon, let alone understood military tactics." He grinned wider. "Probably thinks a suppressor is something you use on a car." The room filled with condescending laughter. Kira Ashford continued placing teacups. Her face remained neutral. But something in her posture caught the attention of Sergeant Liam Sullivan, who sat quietly in the corner taking notes. The way she held herself wasn't right for a civilian server. Her shoulders were perfectly square, spine straight as a rifle barrel, feet positioned at exactly shoulder width apart, weight evenly distributed on both legs, ready to move in any direction instantly. That was a combat stance. Sullivan had seen it 1,000 times in soldiers fresh from deployment. The body remembered what the mind tried to forget. You didn't stand like that from watching documentaries. You stood like that because someone had trained it into your muscle memory until it became as natural as breathing. Admiral Brennan drummed his fingers on the table. Each tap punctuated his growing impatience. "Miss, I need you to understand something." His tone shifted to the one he used with fresh recruits who didn't grasp the gravity of their situation. "We are planning operations that could determine whether American servicemen and women come home alive. This isn't a place for civilians who don't understand what we do." Kira nodded respectfully. She moved around the table, and as she did, her eyes briefly scanned the tactical map spread across the mahogany surface. Satellite imagery of mountainous terrain, grid coordinates, elevation markers, route designations. For just a moment, less than 3 seconds, her gaze lingered on the Afghan mountains marked in the upper quadrant. Her jaw tightened, so subtle that only someone watching closely would notice. A micro-expression that came and went like a shadow. "Doctor." Sarah Callahan, the Pentagon civilian analyst, interjected gently. Sir, she's just doing her job. Perhaps we could continue once she's finished? Brennan's expression hardened. Dr. Callahan, with all due respect, you're not military either. Some of us understand the importance of operational security. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Major Blackwell leaned forward, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years in Army intelligence. The Admiral's right. We can't have unauthorized personnel present when we're discussing troop movements and tactical positions. Kira finished arranging the tea service and stepped back, her hands clasped behind her back in what appeared to be a respectful gesture. But again, Sullivan noticed something odd. Her stance was perfectly aligned, back straight, weight centered, ready. It was the posture of someone who had been trained for combat readiness, not kitchen service. What's your security clearance level, miss? Brennan demanded. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. I serve where I'm needed, sir. Kira's response was carefully measured, neutral, not quite an answer. Colonel Garrison laughed harshly. That's not an answer. Either you have clearance or you don't. He shook his head. This isn't some civilian office where anyone can wander in during meetings. The tension built like pressure before a storm. The officers waited for Brennan to dismiss her, but something about Kira's calm demeanor seemed to irritate the Admiral further. She wasn't cowering. She wasn't apologizing profusely as he expected. Instead, she stood with quiet dignity, waiting for orders like a soldier awaiting commands. You know what I think? Thornton said with a smirk. I think our little tea server here watches too many military movies. Probably thinks she knows something about what we do. More laughter rippled through the room, but it was cut short when Brennan's aide knocked on the door. Sir, we have updated satellite intelligence from CENTCOM. The aide entered with a classified folder, the kind sealed with tamper-evident tape. Brennan reviewed the documents. His expression shifted from irritation to something darker, graver. The laugh lines around his eyes disappeared. Gentlemen, we have a problem. He looked up from the pages. Our intelligence suggests there was a leak in the Afghanistan operations. Sensitive coordinates were compromised 8 months ago. He paused. The result was the loss of an entire special operations unit. Kira's hands, still clasped behind her back, tightened slightly. Her breathing remained steady, too steady, controlled with the kind of discipline that came from years of training. The mention of Afghanistan had triggered a response that only a trained observer would notice. A muscle in her neck tensed, released. Her eyes remained fixed on a point on the far wall, but something had shifted in her bearing. Sullivan watched her carefully. When Brennan mentioned the ghost unit betrayal, he saw her jaw clench for just a fraction of a second before returning to its neutral position. The Admiral continued, spreading new photographs across the table. The leaked coordinates led to an ambush. 8 highly trained operators lost their lives because someone sold them out. The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Each officer processed the weight of those words. 8 soldiers, dead, because someone with access to classified information had traded American lives for money. Brennan stood and began pacing. His frustration was evident in every movement. We need to identify how this information was compromised. Too many good soldiers have died because of security breaches. His voice grew harder, and I will not allow it to happen again on my watch. As he spoke, Kira moved to collect the empty cream pitcher. The movement brought her closer to the tactical displays on the wall. Satellite imagery, troop deployment maps, operational timelines. Brennan noticed her proximity to the classified materials and exploded. What are you still doing here? His voice filled the room like thunder. I thought I made it clear that you need to leave. She's finishing the service, Admiral, Dr. Callahan said defensively. There's no need to be harsh. Harsh? Brennan's voice rose another level. Dr. Callahan, you clearly don't understand military protocol. We don't discuss classified operations in front of unauthorized personnel, no matter how harmless they might appear. Garrison stood as well, his patience clearly exhausted. Security should escort her out immediately. We can't continue with civilians present. But none of them noticed what Kira had actually been doing. As they argued about her presence, she had positioned herself with a clear view of the entire room. Her seemingly humble task of clearing the tea service provided perfect cover for observing every face, every reaction, every tell that might indicate guilt or knowledge. She was reading the room like a book. Brennan deliberately knocked his coffee cup over. The dark liquid spread across some non-classified papers, a brown stain creeping toward the edge of the table. "Clean this up," he ordered curtly, testing to see how she would respond to direct commands. Kira immediately moved to address the spill, but her cleaning technique was unlike anything the officers had seen from typical custodial staff. She worked in a precise grid pattern, starting at the center of the spill, containing the liquid before it could spread further, then expanding outward in systematic sections, using the most efficient method possible to prevent any secondary damage to documents or equipment. It was the kind of systematic approach taught in military training for dealing with chemical spills or contaminated areas, not the random dabbing of someone who cleaned for a living. Major Blackwell, who had extensive field experience, found himself watching her technique with growing curiosity. "Interesting approach to spill containment," he murmured to himself. As the discussion resumed, Brennan began outlining tactical positions for future operations. "The problem with the Kandahar region," he said, pointing to the map, "is the elevation changes make accurate fire support calculations extremely difficult." He traced a route through mountain passes, his finger following terrain lines that rose and fell like waves. "Standard engagement distances don't account for the atmospheric pressure changes at altitude," Major Blackwell interjected, pulling out a field manual. "Sir, according to our ballistics reports, the standard calculation for that terrain would be approximately 2,000 meters effective range." From across the room, barely audible, came Kira's voice. 2,400. The room fell absolutely silent. Brennan turned slowly to face her. His expression was dangerous. Quiet. "Excuse me?" Kira looked up from cleaning the table. Her cheeks flushed slightly, as if she had spoken without thinking. "I apologize, sir. I shouldn't have spoken." "No, no." Brennan's voice was dangerously quiet, the tone of a predator who had just spotted movement in the underbrush. "Please enlighten us. What did you say?" "I just thought—" Kira's voice was soft, hesitant. "The range calculation might be different at that elevation." Captain Thornton laughed loudly. The sound was harsh in the quiet room. "Oh, this is rich. Our tea lady thinks she's a ballistics expert now." But Major Blackwell wasn't laughing. He had pulled out his field calculator. His fingers moved quickly across the keys, inputting variables: elevation, atmospheric pressure, temperature, wind speed. After a few moments, his expression changed. The color drained from his face. "Actually, sir," Blackwell's voice was quieter now, "accounting for the altitude and atmospheric pressure in that specific region," he looked up from his calculator, "she's right. The effective range would be closer to 2,400 meters. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room like fog rolling in from the sea. How did a civilian service worker know advanced ballistics calculations that required specialized training and field experience? The kind of knowledge that came from years of working with long-range weapons systems in mountainous terrain? Brennan's eyes narrowed as he studied Kira more carefully, really looked at her for the first time since she had entered. "That's quite an educated guess for someone who serves tea." Kira's response was meek, almost apologetic. "I watch a lot of documentaries, sir. Military history. I find it interesting." "What kind of documentaries?" Major Blackwell asked. His tone had shifted from dismissive to genuinely curious. "Military history, sir. Combat operations. Tactical studies." She paused. "I find the technical aspects fascinating," Garrison scoffed, but there was less conviction in his voice now. "Watching documentaries doesn't make you qualified to discuss tactical operations, young lady." The meeting continued, but something had changed. There was now an undercurrent of curiosity about the quiet woman who had demonstrated unexpected knowledge. Brennan found himself testing her, dropping military terminology into his conversations to see if she would react. When he mentioned click measurements, military slang for kilometers, Kira didn't flinch. No confusion, no request for clarification. When Garrison discussed MOUT classifications, military operations in urban terrain, her expression remained carefully neutral, but she didn't ask what the acronym meant. A true civilian would have. Dr. Callahan noticed the dynamic changing in the room. Perhaps we should focus on the task at hand rather than interrogating the staff, she suggested diplomatically. But Brennan's testing had become more pointed, strategic. The problem with urban warfare, he said loudly, deliberately, is dealing with what we call blue-on-blue situations. Several officers nodded knowingly. Blue-on-blue, friendly fire incidents. One of the most tragic consequences of modern warfare when American forces accidentally engaged other American forces. Kira's reaction was almost imperceptible. A slight tightening around her eyes. A micro-expression that suggested she knew exactly what blue-on-blue meant. Not confusion, recognition. Sergeant Sullivan had seen enough. Rising from his chair, he approached Brennan. "Sir, I'd like to verify something." He walked to the security station and checked his computer terminal. His fingers moved across the keyboard. Access codes entered. Security database queried. The results appeared on his screen. His expression changed completely. "Sir," Sullivan said slowly, "according to our records, Miss Ashford has level 5 clearance." He turned his screen so Brennan could see. Verified as of 0700 hours this morning. Signed off by the Inspector General's office. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Level 5 clearance was higher than most of the officers present possessed, higher than Brennan's level 4. It was the kind of clearance reserved for personnel working on the most sensitive national security operations. "That's impossible," Garrison protested. The color had drained from his face. "She's civilian support staff." Sullivan showed his screen to the room. "The computer doesn't lie, sir. Clearance verified. Current. Valid. Authorization codes are all correct." Brennan stared at the screen, then at Kira, who continued organizing the tea service as if nothing unusual had happened. "How does a service worker get level 5 clearance?" "Maybe there's been a mistake," Major Blackwell suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. Sullivan shook his head. "No mistake, sir. The authorization codes are current and valid. This level of clearance requires multiple sign-offs. Inspector General, Pentagon Security, Counterintelligence Division." Brennan's mind raced through the implications. Her knowledge of military tactics, her bearing, her security clearance, it all contradicted her apparent role. Nothing about this woman made sense. "Miss Ashford," Brennan said formally. His voice had changed, less dismissive now, more cautious. "I think we need some clarification about exactly who you are and why you're here." Before Kira could respond, the conference room door opened. A man in a dark suit entered, mid-50s, silver hair, the bearing of someone who had spent decades in intelligence work. His credentials hung from a lanyard, Central Intelligence Agency, Director James Caldwell. He nodded to the assembled officers, then his eyes found Kira. To everyone's surprise, he offered her a respectful nod of acknowledgement. The kind of recognition one professional gives another, not a superior greeting a subordinate. Equals. "Director Caldwell," Brennan stood immediately. "We weren't expecting CIA involvement in this operation." "Admiral Brennan," Caldwell's voice was smooth, professional. "I'm here to observe the briefing. Please continue." But Brennan noticed something crucial. Caldwell had positioned himself where he could see both the officers and Kira. More puzzling was the fact that Kira didn't seem surprised by Caldwell's presence. No shock, no confusion, no questioning looks. She had been expecting him. The discussion resumed, but now focused on the security breach that had led to the Ghost Unit casualties. Brennan laid out the timeline of events, showing how classified coordinates had been leaked just hours before the mission. Someone with access to the highest levels of operational planning betrayed those men, Brennan said gravely. His finger traced the timeline on the projection screen. We need to identify the source of this leak before it happens again. As he spoke, Kira's movements became more deliberate. She was no longer just cleaning. She was listening to every word with focused intensity, processing, analyzing, recording. Garrison pulled out a file folder. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. We've identified 3 potential sources for the leak. All had access to the operational details. He paused. All had financial problems that might have motivated them to sell information. Financial problems? Blackwell asked. Gambling debts, sir. Significant ones. The color drained from Garrison's face as he realized what he had just revealed. His own gambling problem was a closely guarded secret, known only to a few. The implications of his words hung heavy in the air like smoke. Brennan studied each face in the room, looking for tells, signs of guilt or nervousness, but his attention kept returning to Kira, who had gone very still during the discussion of betrayal and financial motivations. The meeting was interrupted by an emergency alert tone. Every officer's secure communication device chimed simultaneously. They reached for their phones, checking for updates. Kira also reached into her pocket. She pulled out what appeared to be a similar device, standard-issue secure communications equipment. Why does she have a secure communication device? Thornton demanded. Brennan's suspicion finally boiled over. The contradictions, the knowledge, the clearance, the CIA presence. None of it added up. He strode across the room and grabbed Kira's arm. His patience was completely exhausted. I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. I want answers, and I want them immediately. The force of his grip caused Kira's sleeve to ride up. Just a few inches, but enough to reveal the edge of what appeared to be an elaborate tattoo on her forearm. Brennan caught a glimpse of black ink, the outline of what looked like a weapon. Detailed, professional, military-style body art. But before he could examine it more closely, Kira pulled her arm free. Please don't touch me, sir. Her voice was quiet, but there was something new in it, a note of authority that hadn't been there before. The tone of someone accustomed to giving orders, not taking them. Brennan stared at the covered tattoo. His mind raced through possibilities. He had seen thousands of military tattoos over his career. Different units, different specialties, different wars. Something about the brief glimpse he had gotten seemed significant, familiar. Before he could pursue it, Major Blackwell received an urgent message on his device. His expression changed as he read, "Sir, we have updated intelligence from Afghanistan." He looked up from his screen. The investigation into the Ghost Unit ambush has identified new evidence. The room's attention shifted to Blackwell as he read from his secure tablet. According to this report, the Ghost Unit wasn't just ambushed. They were systematically betrayed by someone with intimate knowledge of their operational procedures. Brennan felt a chill run down his spine. Ghost Unit operations were classified at the highest levels. Very few people would have had access to their specific tactics and procedures. The planning, the routes, the timing. What kind of evidence? Blackwell asked himself, scrolling. Communication intercepts, sir. The enemy knew exactly when and where Ghost Unit would be, what equipment they were carrying, even their individual specializations. Blackwell's voice grew quieter. Someone told them everything. Kira had gone completely motionless. Her face remained neutral, but her breathing had become more controlled, more deliberate, the kind of breath control used in high-stress situations to maintain focus. There's more, sir, Blackwell continued reading. The report indicates that Ghost Unit had an embedded investigator, someone working undercover to identify the source of previous intelligence leaks. Brennan's mind worked frantically now. An embedded investigator would explain everything: the high-level clearance, the tactical knowledge, the CIA connection. But it would also mean he looked at Kira with new eyes, seeing past the humble service uniform to the woman beneath. Her posture, her awareness, her reactions. Everything suddenly made sense in a completely different context. Major Blackwell, Brennan said slowly, each word carefully chosen. Does that report identify the embedded investigator? Blackwell scrolled through his device. Partially, sir. It shows the code name. He paused. Silent Angel. The operative is still active, still investigating. The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone was processing the implications. But Brennan's attention was focused entirely on Kira. Her reaction to the code name had been barely perceptible, but he had caught it. A slight straightening of her shoulders, a brief closing of her eyes. The micro-expressions of someone hearing their own operational designation spoken aloud. Silent Angel, a sniper's call sign. Interesting tattoo you have there, miss, Brennan said quietly. His voice carried a new undertone. Respect mixed with uncertainty. Fear. Kira met his eyes for the first time since entering the room. When she spoke, her voice was steady, clear. The whisper was gone. Sir, you asked me about my rank earlier. Yes, I did. I told you I serve where I'm needed. Brennan nodded slowly. His throat felt dry. And where exactly are you needed, Miss Ashford? The room held its collective breath. Outside, traffic moved through Arlington. Inside, 12 of America's most powerful military officers waited for an answer that would change everything. Kira's entire demeanor shifted. Subtle, but complete. The differential service worker facade fell away like a disguise no longer needed. What remained was something much more formidable. A soldier, a warrior, an investigator. Right here, Admiral. Her voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. Investigating the murder of my team. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Brennan felt his world shifting. The quiet woman he had been dismissing and humiliating for the past 47 minutes was not what she appeared to be. Not even close. Garrison had gone pale. His hands shook as he reached for his water glass. Thornton was staring at Kira with a mixture of shock and dawning realization. Blackwell looked like he had seen a ghost. Dr. Callahan's hand covered her mouth. Your team? Brennan asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. Kira stood at attention now, military bearing on full display. No more pretense, no more hiding. Ghost Unit 7, sir. 8 operators. She paused. Let the words sink in. 7 killed in action due to compromised intelligence. Another pause. Longer this time. 1 survivor. The confession hit the room like a thunderclap. Several officers pushed back from the table, suddenly understanding that everything they thought they knew about the past hour had been wrong. Completely wrong. Brennan's tactical mind raced through the implications. If she was Ghost Unit, if she had survived the ambush, if she was here investigating, then everyone in this room was a potential suspect in the death of her teammates. You're telling me, he said slowly, that you're the surviving member of Ghost Unit 7? Yes, sir. And you're here investigating who betrayed your mission? Yes, sir. Brennan looked around the room at his fellow officers. Seeing them, it all made perfect sense now. Brennan sat heavily in his chair, the weight of his behavior over the past hour crushing down on him like physical pressure. He had dismissed her, belittled her, humiliated her, grabbed her arm forcefully, and she was a war hero who had watched her entire team die. How? Brennan's voice was rough. How did you survive when your entire unit was killed? Kira's expression didn't change, but something haunting flickered in her green eyes, the look of someone who had seen things that would never leave them. I was Overwatch, 2 clicks out. When it happened, I did everything I could. Her voice was steady, but something dark moved behind her words. It wasn't enough. By the time QRF arrived, I was alone. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Every officer present was grappling with the reality that they had been interrogating a soldier who had endured what most of them could never imagine. Watching your entire team die, unable to save them, surviving when everyone else fell. The kind of trauma that broke people. But Kira Ashford hadn't broken. She had become an investigator. She had infiltrated the Pentagon. She had documented everything. And now, standing in this room, she was about to bring down whoever had killed her brothers and sisters in arms. Brennan stood slowly. The Admiral, the SEAL, the commander who had sent thousands of men and women into harm's way. He looked at the woman before him and finally saw her for what she truly was. His phone buzzed, a text message. He glanced at it and went even paler. It was from Colonel Frank Dalton. "She's right, Jack, and I'm on my way. We need to talk about Paul, about who had access to Ghost Unit files, about who you've been trusting for 30 years. Brennan's hands shook. Paul Whitmore, his friend from Desert Storm, the man who had helped Dalton through survivor's guilt after his own team was lost in 1991. No, it couldn't be. The door to conference room E7 opened again, and Colonel Frank Dalton, 67 years old, with steel blue eyes and a chest full of ribbons from Desert Storm, stepped into the room. He looked at Kira, then at Brennan, then back at Kira. "Sergeant Major Ashford," he said formally, "permission to observe?" Kira came to attention. "Granted, sir." Brennan stared at his old friend, his mentor, the man who had recommended him for command positions, the man whose judgment he had trusted for 30 years. "Frank, what the hell is going on?" Dalton walked slowly to the conference table. Every eye in the room followed him. He moved like a man who had spent his life in combat zones, careful, aware, dangerous despite his age. "That woman you've been dismissing, Jack?" Dalton's voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the room. "She's the best operator I've trained in 40 years. He paused. "Let that sink in. And I trained her to investigate you." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired weapon. Brennan felt the floor drop out from under him. His mentor, his friend, had sent an investigator to examine him for treason. Kira stood at attention, silent, waiting. The ghost in the room had finally revealed herself. And now the real investigation was about to begin. The silence that followed Dalton's words was absolute. 12 senior military officers sat frozen, processing the magnitude of what had just been revealed. The tea server was an investigator. The mentor had sent her. The Admiral was under suspicion. Brennan's face had gone from tan to ash gray. "Frank, you sent someone to investigate me? For treason?" Dalton moved to the conference table with the measured steps of a man who had walked through minefields. Literally, his silver star had come from clearing a path through Iraqi defenses in 1991. He set his briefcase down with a soft thud. "Not just you, Jack. Everyone with access to the Ghost Unit operation." His steel blue eyes swept the room. "Because someone in this chain of command sold out 8 of America's finest soldiers. And I handpicked every single one of them." The weight of those words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Dalton hadn't just lost soldiers. He had lost people he had personally selected, trained, sent into combat. Garrison's water glass slipped from his trembling fingers. It hit the table with a sharp crack but didn't break. Water spread across the polished wood. No one moved to clean it. "Colonel Dalton," Major Blackwell said carefully, "are you saying you had operational oversight of Ghost Unit 7? "I created Ghost Unit 7. Dalton's voice was matter-of-fact, stating a simple truth. 3 years ago, I identified 8 operators with the specific skill sets needed for deep reconnaissance in hostile territory." He paused. "Sergeant Major Ashford was the last one I recruited." Thornton found his voice, though it came out weaker than before. "The last one?" "The best one." Dalton looked at Kira with something that might have been pride, or regret, or both. I've been training snipers for 40 years, since before most of you were born. I've seen thousands of shooters, hundreds of good ones, dozens of great ones. He paused. Sergeant Major Ashford is exceptional. Brennan slowly sat back down. His legs seemed unsteady. Frank, why didn't you tell me about this investigation? Because, Jack, I didn't know if you were the leak. Dalton's words were blunt, direct, the way old soldiers talk to each other when the time for politeness had passed. You had access, you had means, you had opportunity. The Admiral's face flushed red, anger and humiliation warring across his features. I would never. Everyone says that. Dalton cut him off. Every single traitor in American history said they would never betray their country, right up until the moment they took the money. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a file. So I couldn't tell you, couldn't tell anyone. I needed someone who could move through the Pentagon invisible, someone who could watch, listen, document. He gestured to Kira. Someone no one would ever suspect. Doctor. Callahan spoke up, her voice thoughtful. A woman in a service uniform, the kind of person people talk around, talk through, never really see. Exactly, Dalton nodded. For 6 months, Sergeant Major Ashford has been documenting security violations, unauthorized information access, and suspicious behavior patterns across this command structure. Kira finally spoke. Her voice had lost all trace of the meek server persona. Now it carried the crisp authority of a senior non-commissioned officer. 17 separate instances of classified information being accessed inappropriately. 14 occasions where operational details were discussed in unsecured locations. 9 cases of personnel accessing information outside their need-to-know requirements. The systematic nature of her investigation became clear. She hadn't been serving tea, she had been gathering evidence. For half a year, right under their noses, Brennan's secure phone buzzed again. He glanced at it. Another message from Dalton, sent before he arrived. A photo attachment. Brennan opened it. The image showed him at the base gym yesterday, on his phone. In the background, clearly visible on his phone screen, was a classified document about troop movements. Anyone with a telephoto lens could have captured it. Anyone with training in surveillance photography. His hands shook as he set the phone down. Sullivan cleared his throat. Sir, if I may ask the Sergeant Major a question. Dalton nodded permission. How long have you been observing us specifically, this group? Kira's green eyes met his. Since you arrived this morning, Sergeant Sullivan, but I've been observing this building for 6 months. You were on my secondary watch list. Secondary? You follow proper security protocols. You don't discuss classified information in unsecured spaces. You're careful about who has access to sensitive areas. She paused. You also noticed my stance wasn't consistent with my cover identity. That awareness made you both a potential asset and a potential threat. Sullivan absorbed this, being analyzed for half a year without knowing it. When did you decide I wasn't a threat? About 40 minutes ago, when you immediately verified my clearance instead of assuming the computer was wrong. A ghost of approval crossed her face. Good instincts. Brennan found his voice again. Frank, you said you handpicked the ghost unit, that you lost them. He swallowed hard. Tell me what happened, the real story. Dalton was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades. 8 months ago, I authorized a deep reconnaissance mission in the Kandahar region. The intelligence came through proper channels, verified by multiple sources. The target was a high-value Taliban commander coordinating attacks on American positions. He pulled out photographs, spread them across the table. 8 faces, young, determined, American. Sergeant William Hayes, team leader, 31 years old, 3-year-old daughter named Emma who asked for her daddy every night. Kira's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. Sergeant David Murphy, communications specialist, 24 years old, Engaged 2 weeks before deployment. The ring was still in his pocket when we recovered his body. Garrison looked like he might be sick. Sergeant James O'Connor, demolitions expert, saved Sergeant Major Ashford's life in Kandahar in 2023. Took shrapnel meant for her during an IED ambush. Dalton continued through all 8 names. Sergeant Kyle Brennan, the medic, no relation to the Admiral. Sergeant Marcus Sullivan, no relation to Liam Sullivan in the corner. Sergeant Daniel Fitzgerald, Sergeant Thomas McDonald, Sergeant Patrick Reynolds. Each one a person, a life, a family destroyed. When he finished, the photographs lay on the table like accusations. The mission was simple, Dalton continued. Insert at night, observe the target compound, report Taliban strength and positions, extract before dawn. His voice grew harder. But when they reached the compound, they walked into a perfectly coordinated ambush. RPGs from 3 directions, machine gun fire from elevated positions, mortar rounds that had been pre-sighted on their exact location. Blackwell leaned forward. Pre-sighted? The Taliban had their coordinates before Ghost Unit even left base. Dalton's words were like hammer blows. They knew exactly where our people would be, what route they would take, what equipment they carried. They turned that compound into a kill box and waited for American soldiers to walk into it. The horror of it settled over the room. Not just an ambush, an execution. Sergeant Major Ashford was in overwatch position, Dalton continued, 2 kilometers out, elevated position with clear sight lines to the compound. Her job was to provide early warning and covering fire if needed. For the first time, emotion cracked through Kira's professional mask. Her voice was steady, but something haunted moved behind her eyes. I had visual on the compound. Thermal showed no movement, no guards, no sentries. She paused. That should have been the first warning. Taliban commanders always have security, but the intel said the compound would be lightly guarded, Dalton added. The intel was wrong. Kira's voice was flat, dead, or deliberately falsified. The team moved in. I watched through my scope. Sergeant Hayes signaled all clear. They were entering the compound when the first RPG hit. The room was completely silent now, everyone imagining what came next. Murphy went down in the first volley. O'Connor tried to pull him to cover. Machine gun fire cut him down. Hayes was calling for immediate extraction. Our medic was trying to reach the wounded. Her voice never wavered, clinical, detached. The only way to tell the story without breaking. I provided suppressing fire, took down 6 Taliban fighters in the first 2 minutes, but they kept coming, dozens of them, 20 to 1. The quick reaction force? Brennan asked quietly. 16 minutes out, might as well have been 16 hours. Kira's hands, still clasped behind her back, had gone white-knuckled. I stayed on position, kept firing, tried to give them a chance. How many did you take down total? Thornton asked. His earlier mockery was completely gone. 17 confirmed kills that night. Kira's voice was empty. My personal best. And it didn't matter. By the time the QRF arrived, all 7 of my teammates were dead. I was the only one left. Dalton's voice was rough. When I got the casualty report, I knew someone had sold them out. The Taliban don't set up perfect ambushes on random patrols. They had specific intelligence, time, location, numbers, equipment. He looked at each officer in turn. Someone in our chain of command traded American lives for money, and I've spent 8 months trying to find out who. Brennan's earlier anger had transformed into something else. Shame. Frank, I swear to you, I didn't. I know. Dalton's voice softened slightly. I've known you for 30 years, Jack. You're arrogant, careless with security, too trusting of old friends. But you're not a traitor. He paused. You are, however, guilty of negligence that created the conditions for betrayal. The distinction was important. Not a traitor, but not innocent either. Dalton reached for his briefcase again. Before we go further, there's something else you need to understand. He rolled up his left sleeve. The tattoo on his forearm was faded with age, but still clearly visible. An M24 rifle, the sniper weapon system used in Desert Storm. Around it, carefully inked details. The number 23 in crosshairs, 4 stars representing deployments, 2 eagles for valor commendations, and at the bottom, 6 names with a single date, February 27, 1991. Corporal Stephen Douglas, Corporal Brian McAllister, Private First Class Michael Brennan, Private First Class Robert Jameson, Private First Class Christopher Hayes, Private First Class Jonathan Crawford. Admiral Brennan stared at the names. Brennan? Hayes? Are those? No relation to anyone here, just coincidence. Dalton's voice was rough. My recon team, Desert Storm. We were providing advance intelligence on Iraqi positions south of Basra. The intel said the area was clear. Republican Guard had pulled back. He touched the faded tattoo gently. The intel was wrong, or falsified. We walked into an Iraqi army ambush. I was in overwatch position, 1,500 meters out. I watched 6 Marines die because someone gave us bad information. Never found out who. Never got justice for them. The parallel was devastating. 33 years apart, 2 generations. Same tragedy. So when Ghost Unit 7 was wiped out, Dalton continued, I knew exactly what Sergeant Major Ashford was feeling. The survivor's guilt. The questions that never stop. Why them? Why not me? What could I have done differently? His voice cracked slightly. I've carried those 6 names for 33 years. I didn't want her carrying 8 names for the rest of her life without answers. Kira and Dalton looked at each other. 2 snipers, 2 survivors, separated by decades but united by the same unbearable weight. That's why I recruited her for this investigation, Dalton said, because she deserved the truth. And because I knew she wouldn't stop until she found it, Thornton spoke quietly. Sergeant Major, earlier I said you probably never held a real weapon. I need to apologize for that. And for every other ignorant thing I said. Kira turned to face him fully. Sir, your comments actually provided valuable intelligence. How? You referenced specific details about classified operations in Silent Thunder. Details you shouldn't have access to according to your clearance level. Her voice was professional, analytical. That told me someone has been sharing classified information with personnel outside the need-to-know circle. Thornton went pale. Someone mentioned those details in passing. I thought they were cleared to discuss it. Who? The captain hesitated, looked around the room. I don't remember exactly. A conversation at the officers' club, maybe? After a few drinks? That's how it works, Dalton said. Classified information gets shared casually, over drinks, in the gym, at the club. People assume everyone present has clearance. They trust their friends. And foreign intelligence services exploit that trust. Brennan's phone buzzed again. He looked at it and his face went even more pale. Frank, I'm getting a notification that Inspector General investigators are en route to this location. I know. I called them before I came in. Dalton's voice was calm. They should arrive in about 6 minutes. You called the IG on me? On all of us, Dalton gestured to the room. Everyone in this room is about to be formally interviewed regarding security violations and potential intelligence leaks. Based on Sergeant Major Ashford's investigation, formal proceedings are warranted. Garrison stood abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. I need to step out for a moment. Sit down, Colonel. Kira's voice cracked like a whip. This room is now under security lockdown, pending arrival of the Inspector General's team. You can't. I can and I am. She pulled out her identification, not the service uniform name tag, real credentials. Federal Investigator, Counterintelligence Division. No one leaves until formal statements have been taken and evidence secured. The transformation in the room's dynamic was complete. The woman they had dismissed was now the one giving orders, and every person in the room was a potential suspect in a federal investigation. Blackwell looked around at his fellow officers. "Gentlemen, I think we need to prepare ourselves for the possibility that our careers are over." "Only if you've done something wrong," Kira said. "The investigation follows evidence. Those who maintain proper security protocols have nothing to fear." But everyone knew that wasn't entirely true. Even minor security violations could end careers at their level, and they had all committed violations. Discussing classified information in elevators, checking secure email on personal devices, leaving documents unattended, small infractions that added up to major security risks. Dr. Callahan spoke carefully. "Sergeant Major, you mentioned 17 security violations. Can you be more specific?" Kira pulled out a tablet from what had appeared to be a simple inventory clipboard. She activated it. The screen showed logs, dates, times, locations. Admiral Brennan discussed alpha-level classified operational details with unverified personnel. 12 separate instances. Failed to follow proper clearance verification protocols. Attempted to physically intimidate a federal investigator. Brennan closed his eyes. Colonel Garrison accessed Ghost Unit operational files outside authorized times. 7 instances. All access occurred within 24 hours of major security breaches. Financial records show significant unexplained deposits totaling $250,000 over 8 months. Garrison's face went from pale to gray. Captain Thornton discussed classified Silent Thunder operational details with personnel lacking proper clearance. Photographed classified documents with personal cell phone. 3 instances documented. Major Blackwell removed classified documents from secure facility without proper authorization. 5 instances. Documents were observed in your vehicle in unsecured parking area. One by one, she went through the violations. Each officer hearing their failures cataloged with clinical precision. The systematic documentation of everything they had done wrong over 6 months. When she finished, the room sat in stunned silence. "Tomorrow morning," Kira continued, "I will present these findings to a joint committee of the Inspector General, Pentagon Internal Affairs, and representatives from the intelligence community. Based on those findings, charges will be filed. The severity will depend on individual circumstances and level of cooperation." "What kind of charges?" Sullivan asked quietly. "Ranging from negligent handling of classified materials to espionage." She let that sink in. "For some of you, this ends with administrative punishment, forced retirement, loss of clearance. For others," she looked directly at Garrison, "the charges could include treason." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Garrison's hands were shaking uncontrollably now. He reached for his water glass, but knocked it over instead. The remaining water spread across the table, mixing with the coffee stain from earlier. "Colonel Garrison," Dalton said quietly, "I've been watching you for 3 months. Your tells are obvious to anyone trained in interrogation. The nervous habits, avoiding eye contact, financial desperation. I don't know what you're talking about." But Garrison's voice was weak, unconvincing. "The gambling debts," Kira said, "started small, friendly poker games, then bigger stakes, then desperate bets trying to win it back, until you owed $250,000 to people who don't accept late payment." Garrison looked like a cornered animal. "They approached you 6 months ago," Kira continued, "offered to clear your debts in exchange for information. You told yourself it was just coordinates, just numbers, not real people, not real consequences. You can't prove any of this." Garrison's voice was barely a whisper. "I can prove all of it." Kira activated her tablet again. Audio files appeared on screen. "I have recordings of your conversations with foreign intelligence operatives. Photos, classified documents you photographed with your phone. Financial records showing the exact dates payments were made. and communication intercepts showing how the information you provided was used to set up the Ghost Unit ambush. The evidence was overwhelming, inescapable. Garrison stood slowly. His face had gone beyond pale to a sickly gray-green. "I need to tell you something." "Colonel," Dalton said firmly, "I strongly advise you to wait for your attorney before making any statements." "No," Garrison's voice broke. "No, I can't let this continue. I can't keep carrying this." He looked at Kira, really looked at her for the first time, saw the woman whose teammates he had killed, whose life he had destroyed. "Sergeant Major Ashford, I leaked the Ghost Unit coordinates." The words came out in a rush. "I gave them exact locations, timing, equipment, everything they needed to set up the ambush." The confession hit the room like a physical blow. Brennan stood up. "Vincent, what have you done?" "I'm sorry." Tears were streaming down Garrison's face now. "I'm so sorry. I owed money. Bad people. They said they'd kill my family. They offered to clear the debt. I thought it was just information, just data. I didn't think about the people, the soldiers, the families." Kira stood perfectly still. Her face showed no emotion, but her hands behind her back had clenched into fists so tight her knuckles had gone white. "How much?" she asked. Her voice was deadly quiet. "What? How much were their lives worth? What was the price for 8 American soldiers?" Garrison couldn't meet her eyes. $250,000. $31,250 per man. Kira did the math instantly. That's what Sergeant Hayes was worth, $31,000 for his 3-year-old daughter to grow up without a father. She took a step forward. Her voice remained ice cold as she recited each name, each age, each family left behind. The 3-year-old who asks for daddy, the fiancé with the ring, the medic who saved 47 lives, the demolitions expert who took shrapnel for her. 8 names, 8 lives, 8 families destroyed. When she finished, she stood directly in front of Garrison. "Do you understand what you've done?" "Yes." His voice was broken. "God help me, yes. I think about those men every day, every night. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I see their faces." "Good," Kira said coldly. "You should see them every day for the rest of your life." Dalton moved to stand beside her, his hand on her shoulder, gentle, grounding. "Sergeant Major, step back." She took a breath, released it slowly, stepped back. Professional bearing returned, though the fury still burned in her eyes. The door opened. Agent Rebecca Hastings entered with a team of federal investigators. Mid-40s, dark suit, the bearing of someone who had spent decades investigating military corruption. "I'm Agent Hastings, FBI Inspector General's office. Before we begin formal proceedings, I need to verify something with Colonel Dalton and Sergeant Major Ashford." They both nodded. "Your preliminary report mentioned a confession was likely. Has that occurred?" "Yes, ma'am," Kira replied. "Colonel Garrison has voluntarily confessed to leaking classified operational coordinates that resulted in the deaths of 8 American soldiers." Hastings looked at Garrison, who was still crying. "Colonel, are you making this statement voluntarily?" He nodded. "Yes, I want to tell you everything." "You understand you have the right to legal counsel?" "Yes, I don't want a lawyer. I want to tell the truth." His voice was firmer now. "I want to tell you everything I did, who I talked to, how it happened, all of it." Hastings nodded to her team. They began setting up recording equipment. "Then let's begin. But first, I have one question for Sergeant Major Ashford." Kira came to attention. "Your report suggested this wasn't an isolated incident, that there's a larger pattern of foreign intelligence recruitment. Can you elaborate?" "Yes, ma'am. My investigation identified systematic targeting of military personnel across 3 different commands. Colonel Garrison was approached because someone provided foreign intelligence services with detailed information about his financial vulnerabilities. Brennan leaned forward. You're saying there's someone else? Someone who identifies vulnerable targets for recruitment? Yes, sir. Someone with access to personnel files, financial records, psychological evaluations, and family information. Someone who knows which soldiers are desperate enough to be turned. The implications spread through the room like poison. The betrayal was bigger than one man's gambling debts, much bigger. Agent Hastings set her tablet on the conference table with deliberate precision. Behind her, 3 additional investigators moved through the room, positioning recording equipment and cameras to capture every angle. The informal meeting had transformed into a formal federal investigation in the span of minutes. Sergeant Major Ashford, Hastings said, you mentioned systematic targeting. How many personnel have been compromised? Kira consulted her own tablet. The device that had appeared to be a simple inventory scanner now displayed complex databases and intelligence reports. Ma'am, I've documented contact attempts with 18 military personnel across Pentagon operations, CENTCOM, and Special Operations Command. Of those 18, 7 accepted the offers and began providing classified information to foreign intelligence services. The number hit the room like a grenade. 7 confirmed traitors? Major Blackwell's voice was hollow. Beyond Colonel Garrison? 6 beyond Colonel Garrison, sir. The investigation is ongoing for 3 additional suspects. Kira pulled up a chart on her tablet. The pattern is consistent. Foreign intelligence operatives identify personnel with financial stress, family problems, or career disappointments. They approach gradually, build relationships, offer solutions. By the time the target realizes they're being recruited, they're already compromised. Agent Michael O'Brien from the NSA stepped forward. He was younger than Hastings, early 40s, with the intense focus of someone who spent his life hunting digital threats. Sergeant Major, you said someone is providing targeting information to foreign services. Do you have evidence of this internal source? Circumstantial but compelling, sir. Kira activated a new screen. All 7 confirmed compromised personnel were approached within 2 weeks of experiencing a documented crisis. Colonel Garrison received his recruitment contact 5 days after his gambling debts reached critical levels. Captain Jensen at CENTCOM was approached 1 week after his divorce filing became official. Major Williams at Special Operations Command was contacted 3 days after receiving notice of his mother's expensive medical treatments. Dalton added, the timing is too precise to be coincidence. Foreign intelligence services don't have ESP. They have a source inside our personnel system. Brennan was processing this information with growing horror. Someone with access to confidential personnel files, financial records, family situations. That's a very short list of people. 47 individuals have that level of access across the 3 affected commands, Kira confirmed. I've narrowed it to 12 prime suspects based on access patterns and behavioral analysis. 12? Thornton looked around the room. Are any of them here? I can't discuss ongoing aspects of the investigation, sir. The implication hung in the air. Anyone could still be a suspect, even after Garrison's confession. Hastings turned to the weeping colonel. Colonel Garrison, you stated you want to provide a full confession. Let's start with first contact. When and where were you approached? Garrison wiped his eyes with shaking hands. His earlier bravado had completely evaporated, leaving only a broken man who understood the magnitude of what he had done. 6 months ago, Murphy's Tavern, about 2 miles from the Pentagon. Describe the individual who approached you. White male, mid-40s, well-dressed, said his name was Robert Mitchell, claimed to be a defense contractor. Garrison's voice was mechanical now, reciting facts to avoid thinking about their meaning. He seemed to know everything about me, my duty stations, my deployments, my family. Did he mention your gambling debts? Not at first. We talked for maybe 30 minutes. Military stuff, shared experiences. He said he'd served in Desert Storm, had stories that checked out. Garrison paused. Then he mentioned he knew I was having financial difficulties. Said his company was always looking for military consultants, high-paying positions for people with inside knowledge. O'Brien was taking rapid notes. Did he specify what kind of knowledge? Operational procedures, base security, access protocols. He made it sound legitimate, like every retired officer who goes into consulting. When did it become clear this wasn't legitimate? Garrison's face crumpled. The second meeting, he asked specific questions about Ghost Unit, about their operational patterns, their communication schedules. I should have known then, should have reported it, but he offered to clear all my debts, $250,000, just for answering questions. Kira's voice cut through like a blade. And you told yourself they were just questions, just information, nothing that would actually hurt anyone. Yes, the word was barely audible. When did you provide the Ghost Unit coordinates? 3 hours before their mission launch. Garrison could barely get the words out. Mitchell called me, asked if I had any updates on special operations in the Kandahar region. I accessed the system, sent him the exact coordinates of the target compound, the route they would take, the equipment loadout, everything. How did you send this information? Encrypted messaging app on a burner phone he provided. The messages deleted themselves after being read. O'Brien nodded. Standard foreign intelligence tradecraft. The app routes through multiple proxy servers, nearly impossible to trace in real time. Hastings continued her questioning. Colonel, after the Ghost Unit ambush, after you learned 8 soldiers had died, what did you do? I threw the burner phone in the Potomac River, told myself I'd never do it again. Garrison's voice broke. But Mitchell called my regular phone 2 days later, said I'd already crossed the line, said if I stopped cooperating he'd expose everything I'd already done, make sure my wife and children knew what I'd done. So you continued providing information? 5 more times. Smaller operations. I told myself nobody died from those leaks, but I don't actually know. I don't know how many people I killed. The room absorbed this. One man's weakness had potentially cost dozens of American lives. Dalton spoke, his voice heavy with old pain. Colonel Garrison, the person you met at Murphy's Tavern, did he ever mention how he knew to target you specifically? He said he'd heard I was a serious card player, that people in the community talked about high-stakes games. Garrison looked up. But now that I think about it, Murphy's wasn't my usual spot. I'd only been there twice before. He shouldn't have known to find me there. Unless someone told him exactly where you'd be, Kira said. Someone who had access to your schedule and knew your habits. Brennan stood and began pacing. His initial anger at being investigated had transformed into something more productive. Tactical thinking. This source, whoever they are, would need real-time access to personnel movements. Can't just pull files once. They'd need to know when and where someone would be vulnerable to approach. Correct, sir. Kira pulled up another screen, which narrows the suspect pool considerably. Not just access to files, but access to schedules, movements, and patterns. Dr. Callahan, who had been silent throughout most of the interrogation, spoke up. Sergeant Major, you've been undercover for 6 months. In that time, has anyone else discovered your real identity? 3 people, ma'am. Sergeant Sullivan noticed my combat stance and began investigating on his own. I confirmed his suspicions 2 months ago and recruited him as an asset. He's been helping me verify personnel movements. Sullivan nodded confirmation. Second was Major James Whitfield from Air Force Intelligence. He recognized me from a classified briefing 3 years ago. We discussed the situation and he agreed to maintain my cover. And the third? Callahan asked. Kira's expression darkened. General Paul Whitmore. 2 months ago, he saw me in the Pentagon cafeteria and recognized me from a Ghost Unit briefing before the mission. I was present as the unit's senior NCO when Colonel Dalton presented the operational plan. The room went very still. Dalton's voice was quiet, dangerous. Paul Whitmore recognized you 2 months ago? Yes, sir. And what was his reaction? He seemed surprised I was alive, asked what I was doing at the Pentagon. I told him I'd been reassigned to administrative duties after the trauma of losing my team. Kira's voice was carefully controlled. He seemed satisfied with that explanation. Brennan stopped pacing. Paul Whitmore, my old friend from Desert Storm. Yes, sir. The same General Whitmore who has unrestricted access to personnel files across all 3 affected commands. The same General Whitmore who serves on the Personnel Review Board that evaluates security clearances and psychological fitness reports. O'Brien was already on his tablet pulling up files. General Paul Whitmore, retired 6 months ago after 35 years of service, currently works as a consultant for Meridian Defense Solutions. What kind of consulting? Hastings asked. Personnel security, background investigations, threat assessment. O'Brien looked up from his screen. He has legitimate business reasons to access classified personnel databases. Kira nodded, which would make him the perfect source for foreign intelligence services. He can identify vulnerable targets, access their complete psychological profiles, know their schedules and movements, and his database queries appear completely normal. Dalton's hands had clenched into fists. Paul and I served together in Desert Storm. We were friends for 30 years. After my team was killed in that ambush back in '91, he helped me through the aftermath. Listen to me talk about survivor's guilt. Help me process the trauma. His voice grew harder. And now you're telling me he's been selling out American soldiers the same way someone sold out my team 33 years ago? We don't have definitive proof yet, sir, Kira said carefully, but the circumstantial evidence is compelling. I need to draw him out, make him confirm his involvement. Hastings held up a hand. Sergeant Major, this is now a federal investigation. We can't have you conducting unauthorized sting operations. With respect, ma'am, General Whitmore knows me. He thinks I'm a broken veteran assigned to make tea and file paperwork. He doesn't know about this investigation. If he gets wind that we're onto him, he'll disappear. He has the resources and connections to vanish. What are you proposing? Let me meet with him. Tell him I'm struggling with what I saw at this meeting, that I'm concerned about security violations but don't know what to do. Play on his ego as a mentor figure. Kiera's green eyes were cold and calculating. Get him to reveal himself. Dalton shook his head. Too dangerous. If he realizes you're investigating him, you become a liability. He's already killed 8 soldiers. What's one more? That's why you'll be with me, sir. Kiera turned to her mentor. He trusts you, sees you as a friend. If we approach him together, he won't suspect a trap. Brennan stepped forward. I should be there too. Paul and I served together. If this is really happening, I need to look him in the eye and hear him say it. Hastings considered this for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. All right, but you'll be wired. Full audio and video. FBI surveillance team will be on site. At the first sign of danger, we extract you and arrest him immediately. Where should we meet him? Dalton asked. Kira didn't hesitate. Arlington National Cemetery, the tomb of the unknown soldier, public place, symbolic. He'll feel safe there, and it's where Ghost Unit is buried. The location was perfect, public enough to seem non-threatening, private enough for a confession, and emotionally significant enough to put pressure on a guilty conscience, if Whitmore had one. I'll call him, Dalton said. Tell him we need to discuss the Ghost Unit investigation, that it's reaching closure, and I wanted to talk to an old friend about it. O'Brien was already coordinating with his team. We can have surveillance in place within 2 hours. Full coverage, directional microphones, cameras, tactical team on standby. Make it happen. Hastings turned to Garrison, who sat slumped in his chair. Colonel, you'll be transferred to federal custody. Your cooperation today will be noted in your file, but you understand you're facing serious charges. I understand. Garrison looked at Kira. Sergeant Major, I know nothing I say can bring them back. I know sorry doesn't mean anything, but I need you to know that I see their faces every night. I will carry what I did for the rest of my life. Kira's voice was ice. Good, because their families will carry it too. Forever. FBI agents escorted Garrison from the room. The moment he was gone, Brennan turned to the remaining officers. Everyone else stays here. No one leaves. No phone calls, no messages. If Whitmore has any other sources in this building, I don't want word getting out before we have him. The next 2 hours were tense. Federal investigators interviewed each officer individually. Sullivan's observations were documented. Thornton's security violations were cataloged. Blackwell's unauthorized document removal was confirmed. Dr. Callahan was cleared of wrongdoing, but questioned extensively about what she had observed. Kira and Dalton were briefed on the operation by FBI tactical teams. They were fitted with concealed recording devices. Backup plans were established. Extraction protocols reviewed. At 1400 hours, Dalton made the call. Paul, it's Frank. I need to talk to you about something important. The Ghost Unit investigation. Yeah, can you meet me? Arlington Cemetery, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, 1600 hours. Thanks, old friend. He hung up and looked at Kira. He's coming. Did he sound suspicious? No, concerned. Asked if everything was all right. I told him the investigation was wrapping up and I needed someone to talk to who understood. Dalton's jaw tightened. He said he'd be there for me, just like always. The drive to Arlington was silent. Kira sat in the back of an unmarked FBI vehicle, reviewing everything she knew about General Paul Whitmore. 62 years old, exemplary service record, 3 Bronze Stars, 1 Silver Star, decorated combat veteran who had spent 35 years defending his country and potentially spent the last 12 years betraying it. Dalton rode in a separate vehicle with Brennan, the 2 old friends processing the possibility that another old friend was a traitor. I trusted him, Frank, Brennan said quietly. For decades. He was at my wedding. My kids call him Uncle Paul. I know. If this is true, how do we ever trust anyone again? Dalton didn't have an answer for that. They arrived at Arlington at 15:30. FBI surveillance teams were already in place, disguised as tourists and groundskeepers. Cameras hidden in maintenance vehicles. Directional microphones positioned to capture every word. Tactical teams staged at multiple points, ready to move on Hastings' signal. Kira stood near the tomb of the unknown soldier. The changing of the guard had just completed. Tourists were dispersing. She wore civilian clothes now, jeans, a simple jacket, her red hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like a veteran visiting the cemetery, which, in a way, she was. Dalton stood beside her, his eyes scanning the pathways. Brennan waited near the memorial amphitheater, far enough away to seem like a separate visitor, but close enough to intervene if needed. At 15:55, General Paul Whitmore appeared. He was tall, 6'2", with silver hair and the bearing of a career military officer. Even in retirement, he moved with authority. His suit was expensive, but understated. A flag pin on his lapel. Everything about him said, Patriot. Frank. Whitmore's smile was warm as he approached. Then his eyes found Kira and something flickered across his face. Surprise, concern, calculation. Miss Ashford, I didn't expect to see you here. General Whitmore, Kira's voice was respectful, deferential, playing her role perfectly. Colonel Dalton asked me to join him. I hope that's all right. Of course. Whitmore's smile returned, but it didn't quite reach his eyes now. How are you doing? Last time we spoke, you were struggling with the administrative assignment. Still struggling, sir. Today was particularly difficult. What happened? Dalton spoke up. Paul, there was a security briefing this morning. Admiral Brennan's conference. The Ghost Unit investigation came up. Sergeant Major Ashford was present and heard some things that concerned her. Whitmore's expression shifted to concern. Fatherly, protective. What kind of things? Kira looked down at her feet, playing the traumatized veteran perfectly. Sir, there were discussions about security violations, about the leak that killed my team. One of the officers mentioned that the investigation had identified suspects. That must have been hard to hear. Yes, sir. And then, she paused, let emotion crack through her voice. Colonel Garrison was there. He seemed nervous throughout the meeting, kept sweating, avoiding eye contact. When they mentioned gambling debts as a possible motive, he went pale. Whitmore went very still. Garrison was nervous? Yes, sir. After the meeting, I saw him in the hallway. He looked like he was about to fall apart. Kira looked up at Whitmore with wide, innocent eyes. Sir, I think he might be the leak. Should I report this to someone? No. Whitmore's response was too quick, too sharp. He caught himself and softened his tone. No, I mean, you should be careful about making accusations without proof. Garrison is a respected officer. But sir, my teammates died because someone leaked our coordinates. If Garrison is responsible... Sergeant Major, I understand your pain. I really do. But you can't go around accusing people based on nervousness. Whitmore put a hand on her shoulder. Comforting, paternal. These things have to be handled properly, through channels. Dalton stepped closer. Paul, is there something you're not telling us? What do you mean? You seem very concerned about protecting Garrison. Why? Whitmore removed his hand from Kira's shoulder. His expression shifted subtly, the warm, mentor facade cracking slightly. I'm concerned about false accusations ruining a good officer's career. Or you're concerned about the investigation getting too close to the truth. Dalton's voice was hard now, accusing. How long, Paul? How long have you been selling out American soldiers? The change in Whitmore was immediate. The friendly mask disappeared completely. What remained was cold calculation. Frank, I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You have access to personnel files, security clearances, psychological evaluations. You know exactly who's vulnerable and why. Dalton took a step forward. You identified Garrison as a target because of his gambling debts. You probably told your foreign contacts exactly where to find him. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Kira's voice was no longer deferential. It was the voice of a senior NCO addressing a traitor. You recognized me 2 months ago, asked what I was doing at the Pentagon. I told you I was broken, reassigned to admin. You believed it because that's what you wanted to believe. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. You've been investigating me. For 6 months, every access you made to personnel files, every query you ran on vulnerable personnel, every coincidence of someone being approached right after you reviewed their records. She pulled out her phone and showed him a photograph. This is you at Murphy's Tavern 4 days before Garrison was recruited. You weren't there drinking. You were scoping the location, making sure it was suitable for first contact. Circumstantial. This is you meeting with known foreign intelligence operative Viktor Sokolov in Vienna 3 months ago. Another photograph. We have 18 photographs of you meeting with foreign operatives over the past 2 years. Whitmore looked around, calculating his options. FBI surveillance wasn't obvious, but a trained intelligence officer would spot the signs. The 2 casual tourists, the maintenance vehicles that weren't actually doing maintenance. He laughed bitterly. A trap, of course. Frank, I expected better from you. I expected better from you too, Paul. We served together, bled together. I trusted you with my life. Dalton's voice was raw with betrayal. Why? Why did you do it? For a long moment, Whitmore said nothing. Then slowly he began to talk. Perhaps because he knew he was caught. Perhaps because after 12 years of lying, he wanted someone to know the truth. Desert Storm destroyed my career, Frank. You know that. What are you talking about? You got a bronze star. You got a silver star. You got promoted. You became a legend. Colonel Dalton, the hero who survived when his team didn't. Whitmore's voice was bitter. I was part of the same operation, same intelligence failure, same ambush, but I was 2 kilometers away in a different direction. Not close enough to help, not close enough to matter. You blame me for surviving? I blame you for becoming a hero while I became a footnote. Every promotion board passed me over. Every command position went to someone else. I spent 35 years watching less competent officers advance while I stayed at the same rank. His voice rose. I gave everything to this country, and it gave me nothing back. So you betrayed it. Kira's voice was disgusted. I took what was owed to me. Whitmore turned to face her fully. Foreign intelligence contacts approached me 12 years ago, offered real money, millions of dollars over time, all for information I could access legally. Personnel files, security clearances, psychological profiles. You identified vulnerable soldiers for recruitment. I identified opportunities, people with weaknesses that could be exploited. Garrison wasn't the first, won't be the last. He smiled coldly. The system is broken, Sergeant Major, full of weak people who will betray their country for money. I just helped foreign services find them more efficiently. Brennan had moved closer during this confession. Now he stepped into view. Paul, what about the ghost unit? What about those 8 soldiers? Whitmore saw Brennan, and his expression hardened further. Jack, should have known you'd be here too. Why did you target ghost unit specifically? Because Frank created it. Frank's special unit. Frank's hand-picked operators. Whitmore looked at Dalton with pure hatred. You got to build your legacy one more time. Train the next generation. Be the mentor, the legend. I wanted to take that from you. The words hit Dalton like a physical blow. You killed 8 soldiers because you were jealous of me? I gave their coordinates to people who could use them. What happened after that wasn't my concern. Whitmore's voice was devoid of emotion. They were just data points, just numbers on a screen. Kira moved faster than anyone expected. One moment she was standing still. The next, she had Whitmore's arm twisted behind his back and forced him to his knees. Her voice was deadly quiet in his ear. Say their names. What? The data points, the numbers, say their names. She twisted his arm harder. Not enough to break it, just enough to make him understand how much she wanted to. I don't know their names. Then let me teach you. Kira's voice was ice. Sergeant William Hayes, 31 years old, 3-year-old daughter named Emma. Say it. Whitmore stayed silent. She twisted harder. Say it. Sergeant William Hayes. The words were forced out through gritted teeth. Sergeant David Murphy, 24 years old, engaged, ring still in his pocket when he died. Say it. Sergeant David Murphy. Kira went through all 8 names, made Whitmore repeat each one. Sergeant James O'Connor, Sergeant Kyle Brennan, Sergeant Marcus Sullivan, Sergeant Daniel Fitzgerald, Sergeant Thomas McDonald, Sergeant Patrick Reynolds, made him acknowledge that they were people, not data. By the end, the general's face was streaked with tears, not from pain, from the weight of finally confronting what he had done. FBI agents moved in from all directions. Hastings appeared with handcuffs. General Paul Whitmore, you're under arrest for espionage, conspiracy to commit murder, and treason against the United States. As they cuffed him, Whitmore looked at Dalton one last time. I'm sorry, Frank. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. No, you're not. Dalton's voice was empty. You're sorry you got caught, that's all. They took Whitmore away. Kira stood watching, her hands clenched into fists. She had done it, found justice for her team. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt hollow. Dalton put a hand on her shoulder. You did good, Sergeant Major. They would be proud. Would they? Her voice was rough. 8 months to find the truth. 8 months they've been in the ground. Did it matter? Yes, it mattered to their families. It will matter to every soldier who knows that someone cared enough to find the truth. He paused. It mattered to me. I spent 33 years not knowing who sold out my team. You gave me that answer today, too. You gave us both closure. Brennan joined them. The Admiral looked a decade older than he had that morning. Sergeant Major Ashford, I owe you an apology that goes beyond words. I treated you with disrespect, dismissed your service, physically grabbed you. He came to attention and saluted. You are a better soldier than I will ever be, and I am honored to have witnessed your dedication to justice. Kiera returned the salute. Sir, your negligence contributed to my team's death, but you weren't the traitor. Learn from this. Be better. That's all I ask. Over the next 3 months, the investigation expanded. Whitmore's cooperation, motivated by a deal to avoid execution, led to the identification of all 7 compromised personnel. Court-martials were held, sentences handed down. The Foreign Intelligence Network was dismantled. Colonel Garrison received 20 years in military prison. His cooperation had reduced his sentence from life. He would spend every day of those 20 years remembering the 8 names Kira had made him learn. General Whitmore received 35 years in federal prison. At 62, it was effectively a life sentence. He would die in prison, his legacy destroyed, his betrayal a permanent stain on his family's name. Admiral Brennan accepted forced retirement. He was cleared of criminal wrongdoing, but his security failures were too egregious to ignore. He left the Navy after 30 years of service. His new mission was working with veteran support organizations, trying to help soldiers struggling with the same issues that had made them vulnerable to recruitment. The other officers from that morning's briefing faced various administrative punishments. Some were forced to retire. Others lost security clearances. None faced criminal charges, but all understood how close they had come to destroying their lives through carelessness. 6 months after the arrests, Kiera stood at Arlington National Cemetery again. This time not for an operation, for remembrance. She placed roses on 8 graves. White roses, one for each fallen member of Ghost Unit 7. She knelt at each headstone, touching the engraved names, remembering the men who had become her brothers. Dalton joined her after she finished. Together they walked to another section of Arlington. 6 more graves, older headstones, faded dates from 1991. They have justice now too, Kira said softly. Whitmore admitted he was connected to the intelligence failure that killed your team. Different foreign service, same type of betrayal. 33 years, Dalton's voice was rough. 33 years of not knowing, of wondering if I could have done something different. Now I know. Someone sold us out, just like they sold out your team. They stood in silence for a long moment. 2 survivors, 2 generations, connected by the same unbearable weight. Does it get easier? Kira asked. The guilt? No, but it becomes manageable. You learn to carry it. Dalton looked at her. And you learn to honor them by living well, by making sure their sacrifice meant something. How do I do that? You already are, he smiled slightly. I hear you've been promoted. Lieutenant Colonel Ashford now? The promotion came through last week, along with a new assignment. She paused. FBI wants me to head a joint task force. Military and federal investigators working together to identify and prevent foreign intelligence recruitment of American personnel. Perfect assignment for you. I'm scared I'll fail, that more soldiers will die because I miss something. You'll miss things, everyone does, but you'll catch more than you miss. And every soldier you protect is another family that doesn't get that knock on the door. Dalton's voice was firm. This is your mission now. Not revenge, prevention. Making sure what happened to Ghost Unit never happens to anyone else. Kira nodded slowly. Will you help me? The task force needs experienced personnel, people who understand both military operations and intelligence gathering. I'm 67 years old, past retirement age. I'm not asking for a soldier. I'm asking for a mentor. She met his eyes. You've been carrying your 6 names for 33 years. Help me make sure no one else has to carry 8. Dalton smiled, a real smile this time. All right, Lieutenant Colonel, I'm in. They walked back through Arlington together, past rows of white headstones, past the tomb of the unknown soldier, past memorials to wars spanning centuries. American soldiers who had given everything, some to enemy action, some to betrayal, all deserving to be remembered, to have their sacrifice mean something. 3 months later, Kira stood at a podium in the FBI's training facility in Quantico. Before her sat 30 investigators, military and civilian, young and experienced, all selected for the new counterintelligence task force. Dalton sat in the front row, ready to guest lecture on surveillance techniques and behavioral analysis. Good morning, Kira began. You're here because foreign intelligence services are targeting American military personnel. They identify vulnerable soldiers, exploit their weaknesses, turn them into traitors. Our job is to identify these recruitment attempts before they succeed. She activated a screen behind her. 8 faces appeared, young, determined, American, her ghost unit teammates. These 8 soldiers died because someone betrayed them, sold their coordinates to the enemy for money. Her voice was steady, strong. They died 8 months ago. It took me 6 months to find the traitor, 2 months too late to prevent another security breach that cost more American lives. The room was completely silent. We're going to do better. We're going to identify vulnerable personnel before foreign services do. We're going to intercept recruitment attempts. We're going to protect American soldiers. She paused. Because every single one of them deserves to come home, to their families, their children, their futures. She clicked to the next slide. Training protocols, survey techniques, behavioral analysis, the tools they would use to prevent the next betrayal. Colonel Dalton will teach you old-school observation techniques that don't rely on technology. I'll teach you how to blend in, how to investigate without being noticed, how to build cases that stand up in federal court. She looked at each face in the room. Together, we're going to make sure that no more families get that knock on the door because someone sold out their soldier. The training began. Intensive, demanding. The best techniques from military intelligence, FBI counter-espionage, and NSA signals intelligence, combined into a comprehensive program designed to identify and stop foreign recruitment of American personnel. Dalton taught patience, observation, the art of seeing what others missed. Kira taught infiltration, evidence gathering, the systematic documentation that had brought down Whitmore and Garrison. Together they built something new, a task force that honored the fallen by protecting the living. 1 year after the arrests, Kira received a letter. The handwriting was shaky but determined. It was from Emma Hayes, Sergeant William Hayes's 4-year-old daughter. The letter was short, simple, written with a child's understanding but profound in its impact. Dear Miss Kiera, Mommy says you caught the bad man who hurt Daddy. Thank you. I miss Daddy every day, but I'm glad the bad man can't hurt other daddies now. Love, Emma. Kira kept that letter in her desk drawer. On hard days when the investigation seemed impossible, when foreign services seemed too sophisticated to catch, she would read Emma's words. Thank you for catching the bad man, so other daddies could come home. That was the mission. That was the purpose. That was how the fallen were honored. Not with tears, not with guilt, but with action, with dedication, with making sure their sacrifice prevented future tragedies. The task force's first major success came 8 months after its formation. They identified a recruitment attempt against a major at CENTCOM. Financial stress from student loans, young family, pressure to provide. The foreign operative who approached him was arrested. The major received counseling and financial assistance through proper military channels. His vulnerability addressed, his loyalty preserved. No betrayal, no security breach, no ambush, no families destroyed. One soldier protected, one mission accomplished. It wouldn't bring back Ghost Unit 7, wouldn't erase the 8 names on Kira's arm, wouldn't give Dalton back the 33 years he spent wondering about his team's betrayal. But it meant something. It mattered. And for 2 survivors carrying the weight of their fallen teammates, that was enough. Kira stood at her office window, looking out over Quantico's training grounds, young investigators learning the skills that would protect American soldiers. Dalton's voice drifted from a classroom, teaching the next generation of counterintelligence officers. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who had survived what broke most people, who had turned trauma into purpose, guilt into mission, loss into protection. The silent angel, the sniper who watched her team die and refused to let their deaths be meaningless. On her desk, next to Emma's letter, sat a photograph. 8 soldiers in full gear, Ghost Unit 7, taken the day before their final mission. They were smiling, confident, ready. Sergeant Hayes with his hand on Kira's shoulder, Sergeant Murphy making a peace sign, Sergeant O'Connor laughing at something off camera, the others arrayed around them, brothers and sisters in arms. All gone now, all except one. But their sacrifice had created something, a task force that had already prevented 3 potential betrayals, a system that identified vulnerable soldiers before foreign services could exploit them, a legacy that protected the living. Kira touched the photograph gently. "We're making a difference," she whispered. "Your deaths weren't in vain." The sun set over Quantico, another day of training complete, another group of investigators prepared to protect American soldiers from betrayal. Dalton appeared in her doorway. "Ready to head out? Tomorrow's another early day." "Yeah," Kira grabbed her jacket, looked at the photograph one more time. "Yeah, I'm ready." They walked out together, mentor and protege. 2 survivors, 2 generations, united in purpose. Behind them, the photograph remained. 8 faces frozen in time. 8 names tattooed on Kira's arm. 8 soldiers who had given everything. Their watch was over. But Kira's continued, making sure no more names had to be added to that memorial. No more families destroyed by betrayal. No more soldiers sold out by the people they trusted to protect them. The silent angel had found her voice, and she used it to protect those who could not protect themselves. Justice for the fallen, protection for the living. That was the mission, and she would never stop fighting for it. 5 years later, Lieutenant Colonel Kira Ashford stood before a new class of investigators at Quantico. Her rank insignia gleamed under the lights. Behind her, the photograph of Ghost Unit 7, permanent memorial in the training facility. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to introduce someone." A young woman stepped forward, early 20s, determined eyes that held echoes of someone Kira had known. Emma Hayes, Sergeant William Hayes's daughter. Emma stood at attention. "My father died when I was 3. Lieutenant Colonel Ashford spent 8 months finding the man who killed him." Her voice was steady, strong. "She showed me that justice matters, that sacrifice has meaning, that we honor the fallen by protecting the living." Emma smiled. "That's why I'm here, to continue the mission." Kira met Dalton's eyes across the room. The old colonel nodded. Approval. Pride. The mission continued, generation to generation, from father to daughter, from survivor to protector. The silent angel's legacy lived on.